pulse of him.
I didn't plan on carrying Oliver up 3 flights of stairs that night. If you'd asked me earlier how the evening would end, I would have said something boring: pizza, trash TV, maybe him crashing on my couch like he'd done a dozen times before. But plans have a way of dissolving when alcohol and old feelings get involved. It started at Sam's birthday. Loud bar, sticky floors, cheap shots lined up like bad decisions. Oliver was already buzzed when I got there, that loose, bright version of him that laughed too loud and leaned too close. He kept bumping my shoulder, grinning like we were 16 again, sneaking beers behind the gym. "Don't leave," he said at one point, gripping my wrist a little too tight. "You always leave early." I stayed. By midnight he was gone. Not unconscious, just unsteady, eyes glassy, words slurring into something softer, sadder. I'd seen him drunk before, but this was different. He kept apologizing for things I didn't understand. "Hey," I murmured, arm around his waist as we stepped into the cold night air. "You're okay. I've got you." The cab ride was quiet except for his head dropping onto my shoulder. His weight felt familiar, dangerous. I stared out the window, jaw tight, reminding myself this was just care. Just friendship. That's what I'd been telling myself for years. At my place, he laughed when I fumbled with the keys, then went silent when I helped him inside. Shoes off. Jacket draped over a chair. He swayed, so I steadied him, hands firm at his sides. "Sorry," he whispered. "I hate being like this." "Then let me help," I said. And I meant it in every way that mattered. I sat him on the bed, fetched water, pressed the glass into his hands. He drank obediently, eyes never leaving my face. Something about that look, open, unguarded, made my chest ache. "You're really nice to me," he said, like it surprised him. I swallowed. "You're my friend." Helping him change was awkward in the quietest way. I turned my back, passed him a clean shirt, focused on the wall like it held answers. When I turned around again, he was sitting there, shoulders slumped, eyes wet. "Don't go," he said. Not dramatic. Just honest. So I stayed. He lay back, breathing evening out, and I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the rain start against the window. At some point, his fingers curled into my sleeve. Not grabbing. Just anchoring. "You know," he murmured, words clearer now. "I remember everything when I drink. People think you don't. But I do." My heart stuttered. "Oliver, you should sleep." He nodded, eyes closing. "I will. I just wanted you to know, none of this is an accident." I didn't move for a long time after that. I just sat there, feeling the weight of what he'd said settle into me, heavy and warm. I told myself tomorrow would bring clarity. That daylight would make this simpler. But as his breathing deepened and the room filled with the soft sound of rain, I realized something had already shifted. Not broken. Not crossed. Just acknowledged. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like running. I woke up before my alarm, sunlight barely creeping through the blinds. For half a second, I forgot why my chest felt tight. Then I heard him breathe. Oliver was still in my bed, turned onto his side now, one arm tucked under the pillow like he'd always slept there. He looked different, sober, quieter, lines of tension around his mouth that alcohol usually blurred away. I stayed still, afraid that moving would end whatever fragile calm had settled overnight. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. He stirred anyway, blinking himself awake, eyes unfocused at first. Then they landed on me. Recognition hit. So did something else, embarrassment maybe, but not confusion. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "Morning." He pushed himself up slowly, wincing. "Wow. I feel terrible." I handed him water before he could ask. Our fingers brushed. Not an accident. Not a retreat either. "Did I do anything stupid?" he asked, searching my face. I held his gaze. "You were honest." That made him go still. He sat there for a moment, elbows on his knees, breathing like he was bracing himself. Good, he said finally. Because I remember it. All of it. Silence stretched. The kind that presses against your ribs. I wasn't drunk confessing. He continued. I've thought about saying it sober 100 times. Just never had the nerve. My mouth felt dry. Oliver, I know. He cut in gently. You don't have to say anything yet. I just needed you to know I wasn't using the alcohol as an excuse. He stood, pacing once, then stopped in front of me. Close enough that I could feel the heat of him. He didn't touch me. That restraint was louder than anything else. I don't expect you to fix this, he said, or jump into anything. I just couldn't keep pretending this was nothing. My heartbeat was in my ears. Years of almosts, of swallowed looks and late-night conversations that edged around truth, all crowded in. I nodded slowly. Thank you for not pretending. He smiled then, small, relieved. Can I stay for coffee? I laughed, tension cracking just a little. Yeah. You can stay. In the kitchen, we moved around each other carefully, like learning a new gravity. No touching, but awareness everywhere. When he wrapped his hands around the mug, they shook slightly. I noticed. He noticed that I noticed. Last night scared me, he admitted quietly. Me too. But, he added, meeting my eyes, it also felt like relief. I leaned back against the counter, letting that sink in. The morning felt suspended, like we'd stepped out of time. We talked about small things after that: work, Sam's party, how bad the music had been. Normality easing us back into ourselves. But underneath it all was a shared understanding, steady and warm. When he finally left, pausing at the door like he might say more, he just said, I'm glad it was you. After he was gone, I stood there for a long moment, coffee cooling in my hands. Nothing had been resolved. Nothing had been crossed. But something had been named. And that, somehow, felt like the bravest part. The week after felt longer than it should have. Oliver and I texted, nothing dramatic, nothing flirty. Just check-ins. You alive? Coffee later? It was like we'd both agreed to move slowly, to let the truth breathe instead of rushing it into something breakable. We met on Thursday. Same cafe we'd been going to for years. Same chip table by the window. Different air. He showed up early, which he never did. Sat there twisting the cardboard sleeve around his cup, eyes lifting the second I walked in. That look again, intent, steady. Not drunk. Not confused. You look tired, he said. I didn't sleep much. Me either. A beat. For different reasons. We smiled, tentative but real. Conversation came easily, until it didn't. There was a moment, right between talking about work and the weather, where everything slowed. He leaned in, elbows on the table, voice dropping. I keep thinking about that night, he said. Not the drinking part. The honesty part. I nodded. Same. I meant what I said. He continued. About remembering. About wanting this to be intentional. My chest tightened, but not unpleasantly. I'm scared, I admitted. Good, he said gently. Me too. We walked after that. No destination. Just the city breathing around us. At one point, his hand brushed mine. This time, neither of us pulled away. Our fingers laced, slow, deliberate, like we were signing something without ink. We stopped near the river, lights rippling across dark water. He turned to me, searching my face. Can I? He asked. Just that. I nodded. What followed wasn't wild or reckless. It was careful. Close. Our foreheads touched first, breath mingling, the space between us charged and quiet. When our mouths finally met, it was soft, censored by the world, by restraint, by years of holding back. Enough to make my knees weak anyway. He pulled back first, resting his forehead against mine. Still okay? Yeah, I whispered. Still okay. We stood there longer than necessary, hands gripping coats, grounding ourselves. Later, back at my place, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, laughing at how absurdly formal we were being. Eventually, the space between us closed again. His arm around my shoulders, my head against his chest. Nothing more than that, and somehow, it felt like everything. When he left that night, he kissed my cheek instead of my mouth. A promise, not a demand. After the door closed, I didn't feel the usual post-hope panic. No urge to overthink or rewrite the evening. Just a quiet certainty settling in. Care had turned into choice. Choice into something fragile and bright. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of remembering every second of it. The next time Oliver came over, it wasn't late and it wasn't charged with alcohol or excuses. It was a Sunday afternoon, quiet and gray outside, the kind of day that made the apartment feel like a cocoon. He brought groceries without asking. I pretended not to notice my hands shaking when I let him in. We cooked together. Bumped hips. Laughed when the pasta boiled over. It felt dangerously domestic, like we were play-acting something real without admitting it out loud. Every so often our eyes met and held a second too long, like we were checking in. Still good? Still here? After we ate, we ended up on the couch again. Same positions as last time, but closer. His arm around me, firmer now. My hand resting on his thigh, not wandering, just present. The TV murmured in the background, forgotten. I keep thinking I'm going to wake up and you'll decide this was a mistake, he said quietly. I turned my head to look at him. I could say the same. He huffed a breath. Guess that's fair. There was a pause, thick, honest. Then he leaned down and kissed me. Not tentative this time. Still gentle, still careful, but deeper. Intentional. The kind of kiss that says I'm here and I'm not pretending. Heat flared, then settled into something steadier. We stayed within limits, even as the air changed around us. His forehead pressed to mine, his breath warm against my cheek. My fingers curled into his shirt, grounding myself. Tell me if I'm moving too fast, he murmured. You're not, I said, surprised at how sure I sounded. We shifted, adjusting, learning each other's rhythms without crossing lines we weren't ready to cross. Touch stayed above fabric, kisses stayed unhurried. Passion was there, strong, pulsing, but held in check, like both of us understood this part mattered just as much. Eventually, we stopped and just sat there, breathing together. His thumb traced a slow line along my arm, over and over, soothing instead of igniting. When evening crept in, he didn't stay the night. We decided that together, unspoken. At the door, he kissed me again, soft, lingering, and rested his forehead against mine. Thank you for taking care of me, he said. That night. And now? I nodded. Thank you for remembering. After he left, the apartment felt different. Not emptier. Fuller. Like it was holding on to something new. I cleaned the kitchen. Fed the quiet. Let my thoughts slow. There was no rush toward labels or promises. Just the knowledge that care had turned into consistency, and consistency was building trust. I sat by the window as the sky darkened, replaying moments not with anxiety, but with gratitude. Every look. Every pause. Every choice to stay gentle. For once, passion didn't feel like something that might burn us down. It felt like something we were learning how to tend. We didn't call it dating. Not at first. We called it checking in, which was Oliver's way of pretending he wasn't terrified and my way of pretending I wasn't already all in. We saw each other twice that week, once for dinner out, once just to walk and talk until our feet hurt. Every time we parted, it was deliberate. No rushing. No pretending we weren't aware of how easily this could tip into something overwhelming. One night, after too much takeout and not enough sleep, he admitted something that had been sitting between us. I've been replaying that first night, he said, lying beside me on the couch, staring at the ceiling. The part where you didn't leave. I turned my head. You needed me. I wanted you, he corrected gently. Even then. Especially then. My breath caught, but he didn't move closer. He waited. That patience undid me more than anything else. You took care of me, he went on. And I remember thinking, this matters. This isn't a blur. This is a line. I slid my hand into his, squeezing once. I felt it too. The first time we crossed into something more, it was quiet. Intentional. Clothes stayed mostly where they were. The world narrowed to breathe and touch, and the way his hand found mine like it had been rehearsing for years. We kissed slowly, deeply, with restraint that made it burn in the best way. When we stopped, foreheads pressed together, both of us were shaking. Still okay? He asked again. I laughed softly. You always ask that. I always mean it. That night he stayed over. We slept tangled but chaste, learning the shape of each other without urgency. In the dark, he whispered my name like it was something precious. I answered by pulling him closer, anchoring us both. Morning came gently. No panic. No regret. Just the smell of coffee, and the sound of him humming off-key in my kitchen like he belonged there. A few days later we told Sam. Then another friend. Not with announcements, just facts. Each time, it felt more real, more solid. Oliver squeezed my knee under the table once, grounding himself, grounding me. That night back home, he leaned against the door after we came in, eyes bright and nervous. I'm proud of us, he said. So am I. We didn't need fireworks. We didn't need to rush toward anything louder than this steady, growing warmth. Care had led to courage. Courage to choice. Choice to something that felt honest and earned. As we settled into the quiet, him beside me, fingers laced, I realized the passion hadn't faded at all. It had deepened, becoming something we could carry without fear. And for the first time, remembering everything felt like a gift we were choosing together. The first time we went out together knowing what we were, it felt strangely louder than anything before. Not because anyone stared, most people didn't, but because I was suddenly aware of him everywhere. The way he walked half a step closer to me. The way his hand hovered at my back when we crossed the street. Small, protective gestures that said this is real without a single word. We met friends for drinks. Normal night. Normal jokes. But every time someone teased him, he glanced at me first, like he was checking where home was. That look did something dangerous to my chest. Later, walking back, the city humming around us, he slipped his fingers into mine. No hesitation this time. Still okay? He asked, smiling. I squeezed his hand. Yeah. More than okay. At my place, the door barely closed before he leaned his forehead against my shoulder, breathing me in like he'd been holding that breath all evening. I felt it too, the pull, the heat, the one we'd been politely circling for weeks. This time, when we kissed, it was unrestrained, but still careful. Hands explored familiar ground, pressure deepened, breath stuttered. We stopped each other more than once, laughing softly, reminding ourselves why we were taking this slow. The restraint made everything sharper. Every censored touch landed heavier, burned longer. He pressed his mouth to my neck, lingering there, not crossing lines but definitely testing their edges. I closed my eyes, fingers digging into his shoulders, grounding us both. God, he murmured. I've wanted this so long. Me too, I admitted, voice rough. Saying it out loud felt like setting something free. We didn't rush toward anything explicit. Instead, we stayed suspended in that charged closeness, learning how to hold the heat without letting it consume us. When we finally pulled back, foreheads touching, we were both shaking, not from desire alone, but from how right it felt. Later, lying side by side, clothes still on, the room quiet again, he turned toward me. I need to tell you something, he said. I tensed. Okay. He traced a slow, calming line along my arm. That night I was drunk. I was scared you'd take care of me and forget about me after. Like it would be easier. I swallowed. I couldn't. He smiled softly. I know. And that's why I remembered everything. Because it mattered. We lay there, letting that truth settle. Outside, the city softened into late-night quiet. Inside, something steadier took root, Trust layered over passion, intention over impulse. When he finally slept, breathing deep and even, I stared at the ceiling, heart full in a way that felt earned. Not rushed. Not borrowed from a moment of weakness. Just two people choosing to remember, choosing each other, one careful step at a time. It settled into something steady after that. Not boring, never that, but grounded. We stopped bracing for the other shoe to drop and started trusting the quiet. Weeknights blurred into routines, grocery runs, shared playlists, his socks somehow always ending up on my floor. We still laughed about the beginning, about how careful we'd been, but there was pride in that too. We hadn't rushed. We'd built. One evening, weeks later, he came over after a rough day. He didn't say much at first, just kicked off his shoes and leaned into me, forehead to my shoulder. I wrapped my arms around him automatically. That was new. That ease. Stay, he murmured. I'm not going anywhere. We stayed like that for a long time, breathing syncing up, the city dimming outside. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were clear. Sober. Certain. You know, he said. People keep asking if I remember that first night. I raised a brow. And I tell them yes, he said simply. Because I do. Every word. Every look. And I remember choosing you before I even knew what that choice meant. Something warm and fierce bloomed in my chest. Later, in the quiet of my bedroom, we lay facing each other, fingers loosely intertwined. No urgency. Just presence. He traced the line of my knuckles with his thumb, thoughtful. I was scared I'd wake up and you'd regret it, he admitted. That you'd think I took advantage of the moment. I shook my head. You trusted me. That's not something I regret. He smiled, soft and real. You always take care of me. I leaned in, resting my forehead against his. You take care of me too. What passed between us then was slow, censored, and deeply felt, touch guided by trust, not impulse. We checked in without words, reading each other's breath, the tension in shoulders easing as we stayed connected. When we stopped, it wasn't because we had to, but because we wanted the moment to last. We lay there afterward, the world narrowed to the sound of rain starting up again, just like that first night. At some point, he laughed quietly. Funny how the drunk night turned out to be the clearest one. Maybe because you didn't hide, I said. Maybe because you didn't leave. We drifted into sleep like that, no fear, no second guessing. Just the comfort of being known. In the dark, I realized the story we'd been telling ourselves had changed. It wasn't about a mistake or a confession or a moment blurred by alcohol. It was about care. About remembering. About choosing to stay, fully awake, and letting that choice reshape everything that came after. And as I closed my eyes, I knew the best part wasn't what we'd survived. It was what we were still, deliberately, becoming. The thing no one tells you is that the moment you stop being afraid to lose someone is often the moment you finally understand how deeply you want them. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big speech or sudden revelation. It was a Tuesday night, rain tapping the windows, Oliver sitting cross-legged on my floor assembling a shelf he insisted we needed. We. The word landed softly but stayed. You realize, I said, watching him struggle with the instructions, that thing is backwards. He squinted at it, then laughed. Absolutely not. It's creatively assembled. I shook my head, smiling, and dropped down beside him. Our shoulders touched, easy and familiar. At some point, he leaned into me without thinking. That small, unconscious trust hit harder than any confession ever had. I remember that night sometimes, he said suddenly. The drunk one? The first honest one, he corrected. I nodded, letting him talk. I remember being terrified that I was going to wake up and you'd treat me differently. Like you'd still be kind, but distant. He swallowed. I don't think I could have handled that. I turned toward him fully. I didn't take care of you because you were drunk. He looked at me, eyes searching. I took care of you because I wanted you safe. I continued. Because I already cared more than I knew what to do with. He didn't answer right away. He just leaned forward, resting his forehead against mine, breathing slow and steady. What passed between us then wasn't rushed or explosive. It was warm. Earned. His hands came up, settling at my sides, thumbs brushing just enough to make my breath hitch. When we kissed, it was deep but restrained, full of intention and memory. Later, stretched out on the bed, limbs tangled in that quiet, censored closeness we'd learned to savor, he traced circles on my chest like he was mapping something familiar. "You know what I like most?" he murmured. "What?" "That you never assumed I didn't mean it. That I remembered." I turned my head toward him, catching his eye. "I think part of me knew you would." Sleep came easily after that. No racing thoughts. No fear of what morning would bring. When I woke, light spilling across the room, he was still there, one arm draped over me, face relaxed, mouth slightly open. I watched him for a long moment, struck by how ordinary and extraordinary it felt at the same time. When he stirred, blinking awake, he smiled instantly. No confusion. No distance. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He pulled me closer, just because he could. That was when it hit me. The story wasn't about taking care of a drunk friend. It never really had been. It was about seeing someone clearly when their guard was down, and choosing to stay when they sobered up. About passion that didn't need to be reckless to be intense. About remembering, fully and willingly. We didn't rush into forever. We didn't need to. We had something quieter and stronger, something built on care, honesty, and the courage to stay present. And every time he looked at me now, clear-eyed and certain, I knew the truth. He remembered everything. So did I.